The news cycle right now has a lot of stories talking about cooling off markets, prices dropping, rate hikes happening here in Canada. But there's another story that's not getting as much attention, but I think it's just as big of a deal. And that's the rental market, specifically the rental market here in Toronto, but this is happening all across Ontario. The rental market is the hottest that I have ever seen it in my decade of doing real estate. And we have a leasing division on our team, and in our weekly meetings, we're chatting with our agent and just how hard it is right now for people to get rentals. And although you don't have to offer any more than your 1 month deposit, there's people offering a full year up front. There's bidding wars for rentals. I've even heard some people holding offer dates for rental properties. So how the heck did we get here? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tom Storey. I'm a real estate agent here in the city of Toronto, and I run a team as well. And if you like this type of content, if you could like this video, I really would appreciate it, and subscribe to the channel. Join this growing community. But realistically, let's just beat Steve Karish in subscribers. He's like 400 up on me. I've had enough of him. Let's just beat him. Speaking of Steve, me and him have launched a new weekly podcast. It comes out every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on YouTube at a new channel called The Tom Storey Show, or on Spotify and all the other apps you use to listen to podcasts. Our most recent episode was with Jordan from Pre-Condo. It was an awesome conversation. I highly recommend you check it out. It's in the description. And finally, if you're trying to make sense of this crazy market, you can book a call with myself or someone on my team in the first link in the description, a buyer call, a seller call, or a discovery call to chat about the market. I've got to talk to a lot of you that watch this channel, and they've been awesome conversations. But let's get to the point of today's video. And I'm going to share a few articles with you. We're going to talk over them together. And I also want to share some perspective, because I think there's a big rent increase coming. Because if you currently rent in a condominium that was occupied after November 15th, 2018, you are not under rent control. And a lot of people do not realize this. And 2019 was a slow rental market when the Airbnb ban came in. Obviously, 2020 pandemic, 2021, we are just kind of catching up. And now it's taking off again. And I think a lot of people are in for big rent increases that they were not expecting. And I'm going to break that down in today's video. All right, first off, let's jump into a few articles that I thought were interesting. We'll start with this one that says that May rentals in the GTA see largest monthly average rise in prices since 2019. So your average monthly rate for rent in May was up 16.5% from 2021, with prices expected to continue rising, experts say. So what this report is showing us is that the average monthly rent was $23.27 per month, up 5.7% from April. So that's a month-over-month increase in rent of 5.7%. To put that in perspective, if the sale market went up 5% a month, everyone would be freaking out. That's a massive increase on a monthly basis. An interesting quote I thought here by Ben Myers is, "The COVID decline may soon become a thing of the past," says Ben Myers, president of Bullpen Research and Consulting, in this report. So that's the first article I wanted to show you, but I want to jump to number two. And this article is by CP24, and it reads, "We cannot afford to have a city in which people can't afford to live. Toronto rent prices up 20% year over year." So it's interesting because if we look back to this report here, it shows that we were up 16% from May 2021. This report's saying 20%, so slightly different, but in the same ballpark here. Rental prices are up 20% year over year. Which takes me to the third article from the Toronto Star, which is the cost to rent a 1,000 square foot unit in Toronto is now over $3,000 a month. So rent prices have continued to rise. And we've talked about this in other videos, but when interest rates go up, less people can afford to get into the market. And unfortunately, it really hurts the first-time home buyers because, by the way, right now, luxury real estate is not hurting. Market over $5 million is still moving because I guess the rent increases don't really hurt the super wealthy. In fact, they probably gained a lot of wealth over the past few years. But it's the first-time buyers that hurt. And when you can't afford to buy, you start to rent, and then there's more rental demand, and all those factors put into place make rental prices go up. Now, the fourth article I want to share with you before we get into a breakdown of everything is that the Ford government caps the rent increases to 2.5% in 2023. So I'm going to explain what that means if you are currently a landlord, if you're currently a renter, and how we can make sense of it. Here's a brief history of rent control in the city of Toronto. Before 2017, the date for rent control was 1991. It went all the way back to 1991, but anything built or completed after that was not technically under rent control. The Fair Housing Plan brought in by the Liberal government in Ontario in 2017 one of their changes was rent control. So that came into place in 2017, where now everything had rent control. And it was based on the CPI index that comes out, what rent control is going to be and what you can actually raise it so people can't just double your rent every single year. Sounds like a sound plan. In other markets, it's shown us that rent control doesn't actually help the problem. Then a new government came in, the Ford government came in. They took out rent control. There was just a new date. So you know how I said the date used to be 1991? Now the date is your building had to have been occupied after November 15th, 2018. And if that's the case, there is no rent control. But if you live in a property that was not occupied before November 15th, 2018, you are in rent control, which means that if you're currently renting a property that was occupied before November 15th, 2018, you are in rent control. You are technically safe. Now, your rent can theoretically still go up 2.5%. And by the way, this report also said that if it was actually adjusted for inflation, the rent increase should have been over 5%. But that didn't happen. I think a lot of people would have freaked out. It's 2.5%. So your rent theoretically could go up 2.5% in 2023 with the proper 90 days notice and the proper legal notice in terms of the form that has to be sent. That's a whole nother topic we can get into. If you're renting in one of those buildings, you can expect an increase from your landlord of 2.5%. Now, let's talk about the other side of things, because a lot of people don't know this because it happened and then rental prices dropped. Landlords gave rent decreases during the pandemic. But now everything built after that date, and I keep saying it, but that date is November 15th, 2018. Everything built after that is not in rent control. There is a good amount of people currently renting condos in these buildings. And on top of that, there's a whole lot of new purpose-built rentals built by REITs and built by large corporations. These large corporations are not going to forget about the fact that they can raise the rent every year. They're not going to forget it. They're going to do it. The mom and pop landlords might just say, oh, it's a great tenant, I'm not going to raise the rent. The corporations aren't. So if you're in one of these buildings, one of these condominium units, you can expect a rental increase much greater than 2.5%, and they have the right to do so. So my final thoughts on rent prices increasing, I don't think it's going to stop. It's going to be a very, very busy summer, especially in the Toronto market for rentals. But what I do think is if you are a current renter looking for a place, probably makes sense to rent in a building that is still under rent control. And if you're an investor buying a property, it probably makes sense to buy in a property built after November 15th, 2018, so you don't have rent control. So right, there's two sides to every argument here. I'm not saying there's any right or wrong, but I'd love to know what you think about this, because it's going to become an issue. Rent's getting expensive, gas is expensive, food is expensive. Everything is expensive right now. Interest rates are going up. I don't know better than anybody else, but I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you on the next one. My name is Tom Storey, and remember, home is where your story begins.